What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. And with the first week of free agency in the rear view mirror, and with the Seahawks quite possibly being basically done until the draft, because I'm telling you guys, I've done the calculations. I don't know where the money's going to come from at this point. I don't know how we get another signing on the books without making some big plan down the line. Granted, we don't have to get under the cap until months from now, but I don't know why you would do something that would put you in a bad situation later now. So we might be done. I'd be surprised if we made another move. If it is another move, it'll probably be like minimum vet min, something that we can easily account for. But I'm not really expecting too much else. It may be something really insignificant, but I think we might be done until the draft. So since that's the case, I want to take a look at the state of the roster and the state of the depth chart specifically, just to get an idea of where we're sitting and how things are looking for the 2024 season as of right now, just so we can all step back and get an idea of what we need. So I've done up a depth chart here in Google Sheets, and I'm just laying out the positions one by one, and I've decided to highlight a few things as we go down here. So the way I see it right now, you've got Geno Smith and Sam Howell at quarterback. I don't believe we're going to carry another quarterback right now, and if we do, it'll be somebody we draft. It's not going to be a veteran that we sign. That wouldn't make any sense. What are we going to do? Sign Ryan Tannehill and put him third string? No. Running back, K9, Zach Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh. I think that will be your three-headed Cerebrus going into the season. The fourth running back right now, because you do typically carry four, would be Kobach. But I put him in yellow, and when I put somebody in yellow here, what I mean is I don't know if that's a guy you should be carrying on your 53-man roster. I don't know if that's a guy that you offers enough to be on your team. So as of right now, he would be there, but I know it seems not that significant, but I would look to upgrade this position at some point this offseason. Probably during the draft, and it's not that hard to find a running back of interest, but Kobach, I don't know if him occupying this fourth spot is good. Wide receiver, and I did split wide receiver across three different spots to highlight the fact that we're probably going to be 11 personnel this year, just so we can see how the offense actually spreads out in terms of a look. And this top receiver spot, Metcalf, and then I had Eskridge. So that's your receivers out there right now. And then tight end, I had, of course, Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown, and then Tyler Mabry. I don't think this Seahawks team is going to be using the third tight end very much, and when they do, it might be George Fant. So I don't know if we need a third tight end really, but I guess right now it would be Tyler Mabry, and I'm not sure that's good enough either. Mabry's always been a practice squatter. He's been the fourth tight end for a long time. I don't know if he can ascend above that. I think that's probably just what he's meant to do. So going into the season with him as your third tight end is probably not ideal. And unless you do really plan to make George Fant your full-time third tight end, I do think you're going to have to do something about that. Now, if George Fant can do that, that actually saves a roster spot that could be spent somewhere completely differently, which is great. But I'm not sure about Mabry making the 53 man. That's a sign that your roster it needs to improve, let's put it that way. Left tackle, Cross and Forsyth. Left guard, I left blank for backup and starter because there's nobody on this team that can even pretend to occupy the left guard spot, right? I don't consider Raekwon O'Neal or Lendon McCurtis or no, what's his name? Lloyd McClendon? Lloyd McCurtis. I don't I'm not even gonna harbor the possibility that those guys are going to actually be your left guards going into 2024. So I just left it blank, and we all know that we're going to fill those spots at some point, probably the draft. Center is Oluwatimi and then Nick Harris. Right guard is Anthony Bradford, and I left his backup spot empty. It might end up getting filled by Nick Harris, technically, but I do think we're going to eventually bring somebody on. And once again, I don't think there's anybody on this team that can even, other than maybe Nick Harris, who is already listed, can even pretend to be the backup right guard. So I'm going to leave it blank. And we'll all note mentally, because we're smart people, that we will fill that spot somewhere down the line. Right tackle is Abe Lucas and George Fant, pretty self-explanatory. And then I had a couple receiver spots. The slot is JSN and Bobo, and then the other outside receiver is Tyler Lockett and Derek Young. So once the offense fills out this interior offensive line with really three guys, the way I see it, maybe you can get away with two, but I think it has to be three, even if one of them is just, even if it is like somebody like a Raekwon O'Neal, I guess that would be okay, but it's got to be somebody. You're in pretty good shape offensively. So that's how I see it there. Let's jump over to the defense now to get an idea of where we sit. Defensive end spot, and again, I split defensive end across two different rows. The first defensive end spot is going to be Leonard Williams and then Mike Morris backing him up. I do think that this team expects good things out of Mike Morris this season. So I don't view him as an afterthought or anything like that. I do think he's clearly part of this rotation. Nose tackle is Jaron Reed, followed by Cam Young, and then you've got Matt Gotel. And while a third string nose tackle isn't that big of a deal, I did put Gotel in yellow because I'm not sure about that. I think it can work. I think it's okay. But I'm also wondering if maybe you need to improve, because I'm not just looking at it as a nose tackle thing. I'm looking at it as a defensive line thing. And if we go down to defensive end, I've got Draymond Jones. That's fine. But then you've got Miles Adams, who I also put in yellow. So what I'm wondering is if maybe Gotel does need to go, and then we sign or draft or acquire some way, somehow, a slightly better defensive end guy than Miles Adams, and that way Miles Adams becomes like your fifth defensive end, which is much easier to do because most games you probably won't even play. So in that case, that really clears things up a little bit. Like if you brought in somebody like Mario Edwards and you put him right here in Miles Adams' spot, and then you bumped Miles Adams to here behind Leonard Williams and Morris, and then you bumped off Gotel completely, that would look to me significantly better, even though it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. So I'm wondering about these two guys. I'm not sure if they're good enough to occupy these roles. Outside linebacker spot one is Uchenna Nwosu and Derek Hall. That's fine. Inside linebacker, however, is not quite so fine. The first spot I have Jerome Baker, backed up by John Radigan. And I've just never seen anything from Radigan that indicates he's ready to actually play on the defense. I could see him being a special teamer, but I'm not so sure that I've seen enough from him to say, yeah, that's a guy who I'm okay being the next man up if somebody gets hurt. And then the other inside linebacker spot is Dodson, of course. But then you've got Patrick O'Connell, who I really don't want part of this linebacker rotation. Like, if O'Connell wants to be a special teamer, that's fine. That makes sense. But there's no way I'm going to feel good putting him out on the field on defense. We've not seen any of that. There's no reason to believe he's going to be able to do it. So, to me, that is something that needs to clearly be fixed. And ideally, of course, you do it in the draft. You draft a linebacker, put him as the top backup to Baker and Dodson. Radigan gets bumped down, and then O'Connell gets bumped down, maybe all the way to the practice squad. And then everything kind of falls into place in a more reasonable manner. But this is not going to cut it. All right, other outside linebacker spot is Boye Mafe and Daryl Taylor. And I'm wondering if Taylor ends up making this team, but I do think that he's at least qualified to be your fourth outside linebacker in this defense. Cornerback, Witherspoon, Kobe Bryant, Mike Jackson. All those guys are more than fine in these roles. Mike Jackson might bump over Kobe Bryant, by the way, but it doesn't really matter that much. The other cornerback spot is going to be Woolen, Trey Brown, and Artie Burns. No problems there. If anything, one of these guys might have to move positions or not be on this team anymore. And then that gets us to safety, where you've got Julian Love as your starter at strong safety. And by the way, the identifiers for the safety position don't matter that much anymore, because the safety is pretty... both safety spots are kind of transferable in this new defense. So Love's fine, obviously, but Jarek Reed II, he's coming off an ACL tear. We have no idea what state he's going to be in when the season starts, so having him be your top safety backup is not something that I'm comfortable with at all. And then at free safety, you've got Rayshawn Jenkins. Obviously, that's fine, but Then behind him, you've got Ty Okada, who's not shown really anything except being potentially valuable on special teams. So it's kind of like linebacker, right, to me. I'm still looking at this safety spot as being kind of like the linebacker spot. The starters are fine, but they're not so good that this depth is acceptable. Like, are we just going to assume that Love and Jenkins and Baker and Dodson play the whole season and don't miss any time? I don't think so, because I don't know if any of these guys, Reed, Okada, O'Connell, or Radigan, can be trusted to play on the defense. Even Reed, if he's healthy, all he did last year was play great on special teams, but you're kind of pushing it to say, okay, now you're going to be our first safety off the bench. So ideally, what happens is that one of these cornerbacks converts to safety and does a serviceable job at it. Maybe someone like Artie Burns because he's getting older, but I need to see something like that. And that's actually it, other than special teams, which is Myers, Dixon, and Stoll. And as you can see here, that actually takes care of 50 of the 53 roster spots. So we left 3 spots open, and that's obviously going to be for starting left guard, backup right guard, or starting right guard if Bradford gets replaced by player X. So this is how I'm looking at things right now. Let me guys know. Let me know what you guys think. Excuse me. And let me know if you think I'm seeing this in a wrong way or you're seeing things in a slightly different way. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying the mission for the draft is relatively clear. When you take a look at this chart, it's very clear what needs to happen. We need to aggressively address the interior offensive line, and then we need to improve depth at linebacker and safety. We have enough picks to do it, but we're going to have to draft really well, period. Maybe unrealistically well. So there might need to be a need to create just a little more money. See you guys later. Go Hawks.